What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about firearms, tactics, ammunition, the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. What are we going to talk about today? Revolvers that fire semi-auto cartridges, as in 9mm, 45 ACP, 10mm, and more. So stay tuned. Bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Now, a brief history lesson I think is in order here. You may know all this stuff, but we gotta remember, gunfighters, there's people getting into guns and buying their first gun hopefully every day. And they don't just know this stuff. Back before there were reliable semi-auto handguns and rifles for that matter, when they started going away from muzzle loaders to metallic cartridges, in general you're talking about a revolver or a tube-fed gun. There are some exceptions and some anomalies, but in general. And you needed a way to headspace. Not getting too technical, you needed to make sure that round was seated properly in the chamber of the firearm. You also needed a good way to extract that cartridge. Well, the solution to both of those is a rim. A pretty basic design is what we'd refer to as a straight wall cartridge with a rim on it. And you'll see this on classic metallic cartridges like 45 Colt, 4570. When there started to be more prevalent semi-automatics and smokeless powder and magazines, where they stacked on top of each other, that rim presents a little bit of a problem. Not insurmountable, there are plenty of semi-autos that deal with rimmed cartridges, but it's just easier from an engineering standpoint in general to have a rimless cartridge because they stack on top of each other and you don't want that rim locking up on the other rounds. Hence you'll see modern cartridges, more modern cartridges, 45 ACP, 308 Winchester, 5.56, 9mm. These do not have a protruding rim because they're meant to stack on top of each other. They have a groove around the back of the case where the extractor grabs onto and pulls it out. But basically the back of that case it doesn't stick out any further than the rest of the case. At least not a measurable amount. So that's why we have the differences. So when we talk about revolvers, it makes sense in a revolver to keep that rim because you can literally drop it in the cylinder and it stops on the rim. That makes a lot of sense. Also, if you know about revolvers, the back of the extractor, when you push that out, it can simply grab the rims of all of those cartridges, generally 6 rounds, and shove them out of the cylinder. So it makes a lot of sense to keep that rim. Hence, you'll see most revolver cartridges have a rim. Things like 38 Special, 357 Magnum, 44 Special, 44 Magnum, 45 Colt, 32 H&R Magnum, 327 Federal, and the list goes on. But basically, they're pretty much a straight wall cartridge with a rim. But what if you want to fire a semi-automatic cartridge in a revolver? That presents some engineering challenges. A big one is when you drop the round in the cylinder, how do you get it to stop? Because there's no rim protruding to just stop it. What stops it? Well, in general, there's two things. There's either what's called a moon clip. Basically, think of this as a stamped piece of sheet metal that you clip all your rounds on that connect them and you drop that whole thing on the cylinder, hence stopping it from going forward. Also, you can headspace on the rim. If you look at modern centerfire metallic cartridges, the bullet will seat inside the brass case, unlike older designs with a heeled bullet, so you can headspace on that. We have those two main ways. We see the U.S. military face this issue when it was trying to outfit its army with sidearms to fire 45 ACP, automatic Colt pistol. Notice the automatic in .45 ACP. It's meant to be fired out of a semi-automatic, the 1911. But in wartime, there was an issue gearing up to supply everybody that needed one with a 1911. So there were commissions for revolvers to fire .45 ACP. And there are a few that did so successfully. Now there's two main ones that I'm aware of. I looked this up to verify on American Rifleman. They had an article on this. But the Smith & Wesson Model 1917 and the Colt Model 1917. Kind of confusingly, both named the Model 1917. Obvious reason why, right? Getting ready for the Great War needed quantities of handguns. These are both double-action service revolvers. Military-issued hardware. Revolvers that handle the .45 ACP. And again, there may be some odd thing that used semi-auto rounds in a revolver before this, but I'm not aware of it. If you're into the more esoteric, experimental gun type stuff, you may check out Forgotten Weapons. No affiliation, they're just a good channel if you like that kind of stuff. Now these are still pretty relevant because people still use them, still have them, still shoot them. The Model 1917s. You can go look up the differences. One, I believe, will fire just single rounds that you drop in the chamber because it had spaces on the rim, and one will not, requiring moon or half moon clips. Which is me a half moon clip. It's 3 rounds and 3 rounds instead of 6 rounds on one moon clip. So that's how you kind of get around that engineering hurdle. One of the advantages of that, if you're using moon clips, they're generally pretty fast to reload as far as revolvers go. It's generally faster than other methods, just literally dropping in 1 round at a time from a loose round pouch, which was not uncommon for police officers to do up until very recently. Certainly faster than that. Certainly faster than a speed strip, and arguably even faster than speed loaders. Just drop the whole moon clip in with all the rounds. And you get some pretty cool stuff there. I should also mention, a lot of the old Webley revolvers, I believe, are first chambered in .455 Webley, and you'll see a lot of them were rechambered for .45 ACP. However, I think the .45 Webley is a much lower pressure cartridge, so if you get one of these and it's rechambered to .45 ACP, I would consult a reloading manual and reload them to whatever pressure the .45 Webley was approved for. But those are also around, and they're not that much of an oddity, and they're actually a pretty cool gun. Those are the kind that when the revolver kind of breaks open and all the rounds fly out. I actually knew a guy back when I was doing a lot of competition shooting. He would shoot, I forget if it was IDPA or USPSA, with one of those old Webleys that he had converted to .45 ACP with the rounds on moon clips, and he would literally break the revolver in half, like snap it open, and all the rounds would fly out, and he'd throw new rounds in there. And it was pretty impressively fast for a revolver. Okay, except for the cool retro tactical aspect of that and the cool history and heritage, what's the point today? Well, I'd say one main one for today is that 9mm is by far more prevalent, and in general, unless you're going to reload, much more affordable than even .38 Special, probably the cheapest common available revolver centerfire round. Also, there is a wide variety of ammo available and good defensive ammo in 9mm. I don't think that's news to anybody listening. It's almost unarguably the most common centerfire handgun round, period. And let's face it, a lot of people nowadays start out with a semi-auto. So let's say their normal range gun is a Glock 17. And their carry gun is a 19 or a 43 or, let's say, a SIG 320 and a SIG 365. But they want a smaller revolver for pocket carry for whatever reason, for a backup gun. If they only own 9mm, doesn't it make sense then to get that revolver in 9mm? I think there's a lot of benefits there for a 9mm revolver. Now there are many, and I'm not going to give an exhaustive, all-inclusive list of every 9mm revolver. However, there are a few I would like to mention. The first one that stands out that kind of fits the niche we just talked about would be the Ruger LCR. Ruger makes an LCR commonly in .38 Special, 357. They also make one in 9mm. It does come with moon clips, but it also, I believe, head spaces on the rim, which means you can put the rounds in the cylinder and fire them without a moon clip. And I think that's a big advantage. Even if most of the time I was going to use moon clips, I think I would like a revolver that could fire the rounds without a moon clip. That Ruger LCR is really cool in that regard. The Smith & Wesson J-frame did at one time make a J-frame in 9mm, but they don't currently, and I think they're pretty rare if you find one. But that Ruger LCR is not, hard to get. It's not super expensive, and a pretty cool option if you want a small stub nose revolver in 9mm. Also a really cool one, also from Ruger, and I'm not a shill for Ruger. I get no sponsors, no kickbacks from Ruger. Ruger just makes some things really well and affordably. One of the things they're known for, a gun I think they're kind of known for, is the Ruger Blackhawk. It's a single action revolver, meaning the trigger does one action, meaning it drops the hammer, single action, as opposed to double action where you can pull the trigger and it cocks and releases the hammer. Two actions, double action, meaning you have to cock the hammer every time. Wouldn't be my first choice for defense, but where I think this really is cool and shine, plinking, just going out to the range and having fun shooting a revolver. We talked about 9mm being quite a bit more affordable than .38 Special, and certainly than .357 Magnum. You could shoot this in 9mm, but you don't only have to shoot it in 9mm. What's cool about these is they make a model that comes with a conversion cylinder. I think they make a couple of models, different barrel lengths, different finishes, and you get both cylinders, which means you can shoot 9mm, you can shoot .38 Special, you can shoot .357. You would have to see about this, and it may work in some revolvers and not others, with some ammo and not others, but it may, and I wouldn't make a regular habit of it, but in a .357 Magnum cylinder, it may fire .38 Super. You may also be able to fire .380 with a moon clip. I don't know about that. I'm not sure. So that gives you a lot of scrounging ability, let's call it, if you're a survivalist, a prepper. Now, I am, and I don't own one of these, but I could see the appeal there. One revolver that let you shoot a bunch of different ammo. It would certainly let you shoot the most prevalent semi-automatic round, and it would also let you shoot .38 Special, .357, probably the most common centerfire revolver round. So there's a lot of cool and perhaps practical factor there for that gun, the Ruger Blackhawk that takes 9mm and .38 Special .357 with the interchangeable cylinders. That's a pretty cool gun. And that's single action. There is a double action gun that does this, the Schiappa Rhino. Now, the Schiappa, if you don't know, is a very unconventional looking revolver. Instead of the barrel being in line with the top of the cylinder, like most revolvers, it's in line with the bottom of the cylinder. And that's not just for looks, it's got a lot of merit in lowering the bore axis on that gun. Now, Schiappa may not be one of the major brands in revolvers, but I think they make a decent revolver. The Schiappa Rhino, although unconventional, I think would certainly be a decent defensive choice if you're talking about a double action mid-size revolver in .357 Magnum. Also, again, it fires .38 Special and the cylinder that fires 9mm. Don't know if they still make these, but at one time they made them. A double action revolver that could fire both those rounds. That's a pretty cool revolver in 9mm. Now, there are some other revolvers in 9mm. There are quite a few. Taurus. Smith & Wesson makes a larger competition style one. But you can get other modern revolvers that take other semi-auto rounds. Going back to the .45 ACP, if you want a revolver that shoots that, you don't have to go back to the 1917. Smith & Wesson makes some newer, much newer revolvers that take .45 ACP. Smith & Wesson makes the Governor, which not only takes .45 ACP with a moon clip, but takes .45 Colt M410 shotgun. Smith & Wesson also makes a revolver in 10mm. Which is pretty cool if you like the 10mm and you want to shoot 10mm. And kind of that scenario we talked about earlier where you have a bunch of 9mm, except this time you've got quite a few 10mm. That's just your caliber that you've settled on for defense, for handgun hunting, and you want a revolver. And you don't have to deal with a whole other caliber. There is a Smith & Wesson revolver chambered in 10mm. Now, I had to look it up on their website, but the model 610. Smith & Wesson 10mm revolver. And again, this is not going to be an all-encompassing list of every revolver in a semi-auto cartridge. I think that would be rather lengthy and boring for everybody. But I think that illustrates that there are some good options in more modern semi-automatic calibers. Does that mean you should choose one of these, or does that mean these are better than your traditional revolvers and revolver rounds? I would say no. I would say most revolvers are in revolver rounds for a reason. That's what they were designed for. If I were primarily using a revolver for defense, that was my main go-to defensive sidearm, I would probably want it in a revolver caliber, probably .38 Special 357. Most revolvers are designed for those cartridges. You're not doing a bunch of workarounds. You're not having to use moon clips. You're not worried about ejection or extraction issues or any of those kind of things. The .38 Special 357, they are designed for a revolver. They work well on revolvers. They are good, proven defensive rounds. So if you're looking at a revolver primarily for your defensive sidearm, I would encourage you to look at the traditional calibers for it. But there's a lot of reasons to get one in a centerfire caliber. Again, if you only own 9mm and you want a small snub-nose revolver as a backup gun or whatever, you don't want to have to buy a whole other caliber. You want to just be able to go out to the range and shoot affordably with the caliber that you have. Then yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. If you wanted a single-action 357 to primarily hunt medium-sized game with, but you also want to just go to the range and have fun, something like that Ruger Blackhawk that'll take those different kinds of ammo, I see a lot of practicality there. Anyway, I hope this was a enlightening episode for many that aren't really familiar with the world of revolvers or semi-auto cartridges in revolvers. I thought it was deserving of at least an episode. On that note, if you're listening on Spotify, there's usually a little question on the episode, and it's, what's your go-to carry gun? If somebody out there listening carries regularly a revolver in a semi-auto cartridge, I'd love to hear about it. If you just want to let us know what your carry gun is, so kind of get a community survey there. What are people carrying? Anyway, with that, we'll start wrapping up the episode. First and foremost, by the grace of God, and then by the generosity of many patrons this show has put out. If you want to help out, support this message, I consider this first and foremost a ministry. The company mission statement to make godly men strong and strong men godly. Being a good, God-fearing man. Prepared, armed, ready. You want to support a small business here in America, veteran operated, employee numbers 1, this guy. Consider becoming a patron. Patrons get some pretty cool insider content. And if you want to do that, there should be a link to Patreon in the show notes. As per usual, as a thanks for staying tuned through all that, tactical tip of the day and the tactical verse of the day. Tactical tip of the day is going to be for semi-autos if you're a semi-auto person and you've listened through all of that. Hopefully, if you are carrying a semi-auto for defense, you are carrying a reload, a spare magazine, and a magazine pouch. One thing you can do, take some micro cord or something similar, maybe one of the inside strands of a piece of 550 cord, a few inches longer than your barrel. Then take a cleaning patch, a piece of polyester cloth or something small. You can make a very simple and rudimentary bore snake to just drop down your barrel and pull it through in case you drop that gun in the dirt, in the sand. You have something real quick and handy in order to clear that barrel of obstructions. Wrap it up in such a way as it's not going to get stuck in the magazine, but wrap it up and put it in the bottom of the magazine pouch. It takes up very little space. I doubt you would know it was there, and if you need it, it comes in handy. I do this. I have used it. It's a good handy thing to have. If you want to get super high speed, and I don't do this, but you could probably find a very small little plastic baggie and put that patch in there with the rope wrapped around it, cordage, string, whatever you want to call it, wrapped around it, and drop some CLP on there and have a pre-soaked CLP patch. Anyway, that's your tactical tip of the day. More important than that, the tactical verse of the day. The verse today. But Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray. Chew on this theologically for a little bit. God made man and put him in a garden. The first murderer, Cain, made the first city to live in. Anyway, it says here that Jesus himself would often slip away to the wilderness and pray. Some translations may say into a deserted place. I think there's something good and healthy about getting out into nature, into a wild and or deserted place. Some solitude, some quiet, some tranquility. Good for the soul. Now think about that if you need some peace, some contentment in your life. Now that comes from God. But as it says in Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows us his handiwork. Maybe that's hiking for you, or hunting, or fishing, or maybe just going for a walk in the woods, in the desert. Anyway, man, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.